For 30 years, Neighbors for Neighbors has been at the forefront of disaster recovery. We are connected directly with those in the affected areas. Neighbors for Neighbors and our partners at Global Empowerment Mission are working to raise the much-needed funds to help provide relief and recovery to the devastated areas. Donate today at neighborsforneighbors.org.
Welcome to Newsworthy Stories with Jacqueline Jimenez. By now, you have seen the devastating pictures left behind after Hurricane Helene. And now we have a nonprofit that has been in place for over 30 years, which is mind-blowing that it's been there so long. But Neighbors for Neighbors, who has offered hurricane help to so many people. And we have more storms on the way. Katy Marr joining us now to tell us more about it. What's going on, Katy? How can we help?
Well, obviously this was a storm that, obviously Florida, we expected, the coast, those kinds of things are, obviously devastating nonetheless, but expected. And, but when it went up into the Carolinas, Georgia, areas like that, and caused the mudslides and the washed out roads and buildings and that kind of devastation, I think, was completely unexpected, not only by us, but meteorologists and, city managers alike. And so, but what is the incredible part is organizations, since we started in 1992, things have changed so dramatically in the disaster relief world that there are organizations like our partners, like at Global Empowerment Mission, for example, which are actually based out of South Florida here in Doral. And so we're teaming up with them, but they were already on the road, bringing stuff to, North Florida. And then they were the first ones into North Carolina. And so, but they're experts in disaster relief, right? So they're up there, they know exactly what people need, knowing that, for example, there's no potable water, there's no power, so what are those things that they would need so that they could, bathe themselves or, eat decently. And then, so I like to call them the cavalry, right? For example, right? They're the first ones on the ground to are assessing, people and getting them the essential needs, which is, food and water, and then others like FEMA and the Red Crosses of the world and the National Guard are working on safety, and, getting people sheltered, I remember after Hurricane Andrew, there was the tent city, but then they've kind of upgraded. So you could go to like Hurricane Irma, for example, that just kind of went right through the center of the state. And so you'll be finding things like trailers. FEMA has, like RVs essentially, that will be set up in places, and people will live there temporarily until they either find new housing or are able to get back into their housing. Sometimes if the property is accessible, the trailer will be put on their property. That actually even happened here after the flooding in April in Fort Lauderdale. So people had trailers on their property because their houses were damaged. Yeah. And so these are, government provided. But the one thing that is the unfortunate thing is that many people, but most of these people up in this area did not have flood insurance. And this was a flood event.
That's right.
And they are not going to be insured. So now they have a devastated property and loss of, hopefully they're okay, but loss of everything and no insurance to cover it. And FEMA is only going to cover, a few thousand. A lot of people think FEMA is going to fix your home, and that's not really true. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate. And I've been tooting the keep your flood insurance horn for quite a long time. And even here in South Florida, I live in Western Broward, and a few years ago, we just had some really heavy rain. This wasn't even the Fort Lauderdale rains of 23. And the lake, it was like we had lakefront property, and I'm like, we're not on a lake, that's a park. Thankfully it was low enough lying, but had it rained any more than that, it would have been at our doorstep. But also flood insurance isn't just for, the rising waters from outside. What happens if a pipe bursts in your home? That's flood damage. Things are different if you live in a condo, but it's relatively inexpensive comparatively to homeowners insurance. I know that rising costs as well, but more to the point is, look into it and get it, and, and make it like part of your, you got to pay it bills, because you just never know. And we're hearing more and more about flooding events.
All
Although,
over.
yeah,
I mean, really,
yeah, it's everywhere.
I have seen so much flooding. I mean, I know not just me, right? But
Yeah.
there has been so much coverage of flooding everywhere, all
Yeah.
over the world, really.
Yeah.
And
It's interesting because didn't God say he wasn't going to destroy the world again by flood? So
no, but
maybe
so
he had his
maybe
fingers
he's
crossed.
trying to get our attention. That's
Yeah.
what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But whatever is happening, flooding is definitely so incredibly devastating. In fact, my mother called me, and she's like, like you're saying you're west, but she's in Central Florida. But it's kind of, this
Yeah.
next storm is coming right around there.
Is, hopefully he's going to be quick moving, but we just don't know, right?
Right.
I mean,
So
you can base hurricanes are not going, oh yeah, okay, so I know what I'm supposed to do. No, it's weather patterns, it's whatever. And but that's what we're here to do, right? So Neighbors for Neighbors, our goal will be to help those who are uninsured and underinsured, and work through nonprofits that are going to be able to help them rebuild and get some semblance back. We can't help everybody. I wish we had.
So talk about some of these efforts that you've been doing with Helene. Show me what I'm looking at on some of these pictures.
Yeah, so these are some of these packages that are sent up. So you see there's cleansing towelettes and soap and toothbrush and toothpaste and deodorant and things like that. And in fact, it's funny, I don't even think there's shampoo in there, because the expectation is that you don't have the ability to wash your hair because there's no running water. And then those essential items, there's socks in there as well. And then they're put into boxes with other things, all kinds of things from feminine napkins, toiletries to food, and so and then the kits are made by the thousands, the hundreds of thousands, and they're just being sent up, so they last for like a week, right? And then you can get another one as needed. And because obviously even the non-perishables are being used, and especially in some of these areas, like in North Carolina, for example, their infrastructure is kind of thrown off for a little bit. Although good news is there's some things, because for example, one of the staging areas is in the parking lot of a Lowe's. And so the truck was able to get there. So understand that store will be back open again. And that's the other thing. In fact, I just came last night from St. Augustine back down to South Florida, was up there for the weekend. And I saw all of these trucks coming in to South Florida, or into Central Florida rather, getting ready in advance of the storm. Linesman trucks from all over the country who are being sent here to quickly get the infrastructure back up. The state has things in place to, make sure that gas is back up again. There were basically legislation put into practice many, many years ago to make sure that all the central corridors have gas. So know that if you're looking for gas, go closer to the highway and you will find it, because that's where that's its first priority. Also know we get our gas in South Florida from Port Everglades. So we don't have to wait for gas to come. So we're not going to be affected by the northern part of the state getting weather, because our gas comes from the southern part of the state. However, the Gulf is making gas. So unfortunately, this storm churning in the Gulf affects all these rigs out there. But also know that they know these things in advance. Fear scares everybody, but we're not like we were with Hurricane Andrew, for example, like trying to figure out how to help people, or even Katrina.
And you should mention the fact that that's how Neighbors for Neighbors was born.
Yeah. Yeah,
Neighbors for Neighbors was born out of Hurricane Andrew. So they have been dealing with hurricanes from day one.
yeah, yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
As
I
you're
mean, what started initially as just a response effort, like you're seeing now, but we were like the OG, kind of, and
totally.
and utilizing the resources of others to help those in need, right? So connecting those in need with those who can help is our mission, but it is exactly who we are, and we do it every day. So whether there's a storm or somebody needing help for the holidays, I mean, it runs the gamut. But that's the thing nowadays, the being prepared in advance of, we're already ready. So for example, even though we're still collecting and you can come and volunteer and you could give money and supplies are still going in, they were already ready with supplies, kind of like Red Cross, right? Red Cross is already asking for funding. They have the funding in advance of the storm. But neighbors were a little bit different. So we're asking for money for specifically to help. And we're doing the same. This isn't just for North Carolina. I know we mentioned that area, but this is, I mean, very broad spread. So we're going to be looking for the hardest hit areas and then helping our other nonprofit partners who are helping those families, because that's where we realize the biggest need is, and the most impact we can make, because these are families, because we don't want to just keep helping those who've got insurance and got coverage and they've already got a check, and then Walmart is open, blocks away from the devastated area, right? Because they've got their own disaster plans. So the major retailers have generators. They have, all of these things in place. But one of the things that makes Neighbors special, and that always has, is the fact that as a nonprofit, we have some buying power. So, and now companies you've heard of corporate social responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, in that world, companies are now giving, overstock supplies, things like, building materials. They see the importance of giving those. So sometimes we just have to pay the shipping or a little processing fee kind of a thing, because there's even companies out there delivering good, and Good 360 are two of the major ones, and they work with every major retailer from, the Home Depots of the world to the, Skechers, to get things after disasters or help nonprofits do their work. So we're already working with all those folks. We're just, we were already set up to start rebuilding, and now we've got another storm, and it's like, okay, wait, let's see what happens with this one, and then we'll fix it
Exactly.
after.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you guys are always moving, always ready, and people need to know that you're there.
Yeah,
Um, but also, what I've always loved about Neighbors is you're the action tool. Often will tell us about the bad things that are happening, but you were always that action tool,
yeah,
meaning I could call Neighbors for Neighbors and say, how can I help? And you could at least send me to somebody, because you're working with all these
yeah,
nonprofits anyway, and somebody who was on the ground or wherever, whatever organization or whatever thing I needed, I could call Neighbors and find out how I could actually help. And a lot of people, if you're watching these pictures, you want to help. Even I was on a call the other day with all of these automotive vendors and dealerships. And one of the guys was like, you know what, I'm going to, load up these cars and I'm going to head, up to, that Georgia area, or I think it was Augusta that they were focused on. And I was like, yeah, because I mean,
yeah,
they have vehicles. And so can you imagine, a convoy of vehicles going up there?
yeah,
There are so many things that you can do, but when you partner with Neighbors, they can actually direct you to the right people who are vetted, that the things that you're going to tell them are going to actually happen.
yeah.
And that's really the important thing. We want to help, but we want to make sure that our help is actually helping others.
And that's really the crucial thing. So that I have to talk about, because, people will call us, well, I have clothes. That becomes a disaster in itself. Think about just running a store, a clothing store now, or running a thrift shop, specifically like a Goodwill type store, right? So you've got all these clothes. They got to be hung up. They've got to be in some semblance of order, right? Because you just can't have a pile of t-shirts who's going to know what size is theirs and what have you. But so people are like, yeah, but they need clothes. Yeah, they do. But like just a few miles away, the Walmart's open and they've gotten a gift card from their insurance company and now they can go buy what they need. And people, you're better off giving those clothes to your local, Goodwill, Salvation Army, homeless shelter. And in fact, understand that too, that now a lot of people are going to be displaced. They're going to be leaving those areas. They're going to go to other areas and they may be essentially homeless and need services from a nonprofit like that, who is then going to help them. So those kinds of things. And not everybody can go and drive cars up. And so in some cases that's not recommended because, how do you know that you're indeed helping someone in need, right? And so going through the right channels is really, really important. That's why we team up. I mean, for example, Global Empowerment Mission, which I mentioned, they are literally a global relief organization. They are in every disaster that you can imagine, from Ukraine to Turkey to Haiti to Maui to California fires, and of course now every hurricane since. I don't know how they keep up with it, but they have mastered it. So they've gone and taken what we started and go to a next level. That's why we partner with them, because we're a very small organization, but we're great at the connecting, right? We're not the literal boots on the ground, that's why people are like, you're not going to see me out in wherever devastated area per se, but you're going to see the results of the donations. And that's why it's not a bad thing just to give money. And it seems like, a simple, not simple because, people think, well, that's not enough, but it actually is huge because of that buying power. So for example, Global Empowerment Mission has, pallets and pallets of canned foods. Well, they're paying pennies on the dollar per can versus your, BOGO can.
$3. Yeah.
Even when you got the 10 for, $1 cans, we're buying 100 for $1 or, more. And this is name brand stuff, and our partners like at Farm Share, for example, the same thing. And in fact, they team up together because Global Empowerment Mission doesn't deal in fresh food, but Farm Share does. So now Farm Share and Global Empowerment Mission are side by side. So you get the non-perishable essentials pack, and then you're getting, bread, peanut butter, eggs, milk, that kind of thing for enough for a week. And then maybe even getting a cooler to put it in. I remember after Hurricane Andrew, people had a generator, people that didn't, running an extension cord across the street. I mean, we literally had extension cords running across the street to our neighbor so they could plug in. They wanted to can I plug in a fan? Can I plug in a fridge? Some people have full house generators, which also have extension power on them. So a lot of things to think about, as to why to give, and not feeling bad. But I do applaud anybody who steps up and does, does that laborious work and collects the things and brings it. That's fantastic too.
Well, just speaking of the auto dealerships, I knew of an organization that they could go to, and I sent them to that specific organization.
Right. And that's super important, right?
Yeah. So I knew that organization would be doing they are on the ground. They are the group, and they would take that water. They were exactly up there.
Yeah, and because understanding not only the transparency of that, but also the organizational, expertise of that, because I think that's a huge thing for donors, is understanding that where they give their money, because so often they hear, stories of wasted or misused funds. And that's the one thing that I think Neighbors for Neighbors, that's why we sustain ourselves so long. I mean, all of our financial reports are public, if anybody wants to know what an organization is doing, look at what they call their 990. It's their tax form. We don't pay taxes as a nonprofit, but it allows you to see where the money is going and how fiscally responsible the organization is. And that's where we pride ourselves the most at Neighbors. And so, people get frustrated because they think, we have a huge impact, but it's not always cash. It's a lot of time it's donated goods. And so, they're like, yeah, but you gave. And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't have, that wasn't money. That was flooring. That was, a truck full of food. That was, um, that wasn't money, but,
Yeah,
but
but
it
the
is money. It has a value,
the recipients on the other end of it,
it's
it's
gold.
like
Yeah.
cold,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It really
And that's,
is. Yeah,
that's
and
the generosity of our community and our people. And that's why we're called neighbors for neighbors, right? It's bringing those people together. And so and there's so many options out there. I just whether you give to neighbors, whether you give to another organization, just look them up, check them out, see what they're doing. And for me, I mean, I'm just a phone call away. You can always just call and talk to me. And we have partners that do that, like our partners at T-Mobile, for example. They call and they go, okay, so who should I tell my partners to talk to? And and then I send them links of, especially in the local, because like, well, they want to help local. I'm like, well, understand even the local organizations right now, especially in these hard hit areas, they were hard hit too, so they need our help from the outside. And that's the way Neighbors started, right? So we worked in Homestead and Dade County, but Broward County was relatively unscathed. In fact, the phone bank for Neighbors was in Fort Lauderdale. So because but that's also proof of that, just a few miles away everything was relatively fine, right? And so it was like, and so that's what's happening now. We're just, God willing, that Milton is just stays tight, his little guy, and just blows right through. I've been joking, if anybody's watched the TV show, the movie Office Space, someone give Milton his stapler, they'll get the joke. Do you remember the movie?
No, because I didn't
He
see it.
was like this guy in the office, and they just kind of kept pushing his desk back, and he was just mad, and he ended up burning down the office because he was so mad because somebody took his stapler. So the joke is to give him his stapler. But the reason I use a little humor in it is that because you can't get too wrapped up in the scariness of these situations, because otherwise you just wouldn't be able to continue. So we make jokes, but my little motto is, do great work, but have fun doing it. And so, that's, why I can smile in the midst of, a looming hurricane, a category 4, I think it is
Yeah,
now.
I believe it is a category. Milton is a category 4, or
Yeah.
will be
Not to
when
stay
it
that
hits.
way, but,
Yeah.
God, who knows? And that's the other thing too, is there's a lot of information on there about forecast tracks and what have you. And unfortunately, that is not a perfect science. There is no, the people say they they told us wrong. They don't know. They're just giving you their best educated guess based on weather patterns, computer models. But I mean, this is a living, breathing organism with a million factors affecting it. So just be prepared. No
Just
matter where you are, just be prepared. Do what's right for you and make your decision that you feel is best for you. Make sure you stay safe, but understand that even until it literally makes landfall, there will be no way. And in fact, everybody remembers Brian Norcross,
yes.
from Channel 4 back in Channel 6 back in the day, but
Yeah.
then Channel 4. And he's kind of like the hurricane specialist of, our era. And so I went to a conference, and he was speaking about, technology and how it has not really changed. He said the difference was with Hurricane Andrew, he knew that it was coming on a weekend. And this was before social media, before, people really paid attention to the news. He knew that he had to sound the alarm early because no one would be paying attention because it was going to be Sunday night, right?
Yeah.
And so, but there was, that whole thing, well, it was supposed to hit here and then it hit here. That every time anybody says that, I get like a little cringe, but I'm in the inside, so I'm like, that's not true. That's not how it works,
Yeah.
and then the cone, everybody thinks that the storm is just going to go right inside that cone,
Yeah.
that little red area. And like, no, that's anywhere in that area, the eye could fall. So it could be at the southern part of the cone. It could be in the middle of the cone, but the storm is going to, I mean, what, Helene was 400 miles wide or
Well,
something like
I
that.
showed a picture, one of those storm pictures, and I was like, this storm, because Florida's so skinny.
Yeah.
And I was like, this storm is covering the entire state.
Yeah.
You know, the entire state is feeling the storm, and parts of Georgia and Alabama at this particular picture. So I was like, guys, you know, you're going to be, you know, you're going to deal with this storm somehow. And if you don't have good drainage where you live, you're going to deal with flooding.
Right.
So back to what I was telling my mother is that, hey, you might not need to put up storm shutters, but you definitely want to consider sandbags.
Yeah.
Because last time she had like a river going down her street, which has never happened, you know?
Yeah. And you just don't know. And I mean, you know, so it's, you know, you think, oh, I did it all for nothing. Did you though?
No.
Because it's kind of like, you know, if you didn't have it, you need it. And then if you do have it, you might not need it.
Yeah.
Good practice run, you know? So don't be afraid to just be prepared, but don't panic, because understand, you know, I mean, granted, you might need some cash because the bank may not be able to dispense cash,
and gas.
The gas station will have gas. If you fill up now, you will be able to get gas within probably 72 hours. You're probably not going anywhere, so you probably will be fine, but don't be going crazy. Like after that one, you know, the toilet paper thing, that was a man-made, that was a media for the frenzy. You know, but that's the problem with social media. You know, you have to get your information from a reputable source. So also there's a delay in social media posts. So you may be looking at, you know, look at when that advisory came out for the storm, right? So, you know, was it the 11 o'clock advisory, you know, which was just, we're recording now. So it was just a few minutes ago, you know, but it's important to make sure. So, because people will be so fast to send something, and then, you know, the sad reality is there are people out there who are misinformed and they just like to, you know, share their opinions. And you're like, oh, I'm sorry, did you stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night? You know, how did you become an expert in, you know, make sure it's a reputable source.
Yeah.
But
well, thank you so much, Katy. I'm always, you know, it's always important to connect with you. You know, the work that you do at Neighbors is, you know, phenomenal.
Thank you.
You know, I'm a part of that Neighbors family, as you know, I've shared before.
Speaking of OG.
Yeah. Yes. So I was once the field producer for Neighbors. In fact, the first news producer there. But
and that's what Neighbors really, you know, you understand that's what we're all about, is using the power of media to get out the information and share where the need is. That's how we thrive. And we're so fortunate to have that, because a lot of organizations don't. So we toot the horns of other organizations who don't have that media exposure, and help people understand. But understand when we tell you we're experts, we've done this, you know, we've seen a thing or two. We're like State Farm. Right? Is that State Farm? We've seen a thing or two, so we know a thing or two. And I'm all about all the mottos today. But I appreciate you letting us, you know, come on, or letting me come on, and just everybody be safe, and we got this.
That's it.
It'll be a little bit of a mess, but you know, we got this.
Yeah. And when it's time to help, you know where to go.
Yeah.
When you want, you know, because that's what I think will be coming behind this, is that we may be well enough to help others. And I encourage you to do that. Connect with Neighbors so you can help others, whichever way they need it. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Katy.
Thank you, Jacqueline. It's such a great pleasure to be here.
For 30 years, Neighbors for Neighbors has been at the forefront of disaster recovery. We are connected directly with those in the affected areas. Neighbors for Neighbors and our partners at Global Empowerment Mission are working to raise the much-needed funds to help provide relief and recovery to the devastated areas. Donate today at neighborsforneighbors.org.